who some have called the patron saint of Unitarian Universalism, and also inspired by the words of one of my professors, Terry Tempest Williams, who you heard this morning, I ask you 3 questions. Please bear with me, because the second one might be a little tricky. Where is your temple? Where is your God? Where is it you orient your body and direct the silent longings of your heart when your voice fails you? For we are human, and our voices fail us. For me, a spiritual practice is something, an act, a ritual, a witnessing that brings me closer to the connectedness of truth, the reality of the energy swirling within, around and through me, through us, through our communities. At times, the collective energy is so strong, it feels as if I am part of a murmuration of starlings or of blackbirds, traveling in sizable flocks that fly in tight formation in complex patterns. Murmurations that were part of my South Florida upbringing in the late 1980s and that were even more plentiful in number in the mid-1970s. My father describes them as a river of birds. I always wanted to go up there and reach them, he said. A little over a year ago, I moved my life to Cambridge, Massachusetts. I say it was a move over 7 years in the making. However, the calling to ministry came much earlier. It came as a child, then as a teenager, then in young adulthood, but a call I hadn't learned to listen for. It had no frameworks that I knew of at the time, no flock to join, no confidence in my innate ability to discern that the many chirping and whooping voices that were reaching back out to me in the bevy of social demands were sending me messages about my being that involves more listening on my part than anything else. The clear, bold pull to live into the realest, most authentic, truest, and often messiest parts of my being most often arises when I am bearing witness to the wonder that is present in what I call the oneness of it all. Oftentimes, those moments are the ones where the birds are speaking to me. Like the first morning I officially went birding. It was about 6 a.m. 6 a.m. in my early 20s. That was not something I would do regularly on a prairie in Gainesville, Florida. I was with a law school friend who was a wildlife ecologist and a longtime bird lover. She was the one who saw the owl. I can't remember which kind it was, but this being was magnificent. It was as if time stopped and granted me permission to witness one who was looking back at me. It was as if we weren't separate from the owl, from the world around us, not as separate as I had thought I had been. And a deep calm, a calm I hadn't felt in a long time, set over me. And if it hadn't been for my friend, the actual birder, whatever we call that, eyes and body practiced in slowing down for the stillness of the moment, perhaps that's what it is, I would have missed the owl. I would have missed that moment, that shared experience. I do seem to rely often on people in my life to point out what I am missing. Right now, we are in the midst of fall migration. What does that mean? It's where many beings we call birds swap their homes for another, in search of food, in search of warmth. And in that process of moving, of migrating, many to South and Central America, They stop by our backyards and community gardens to take in some nourishment and shelter along their journey. Not long ago, my 96-year-old grandmother reminded me that I always did love birds. My grandfather Yayo would prop me up on an outdoor brick barbecue at the end of a day, and I would stand tall with his hands on my back and holding me steady as I would have to wave goodnight to the birds that passed over their home in Hialeah. A witnessing, an acknowledging, a despedida. That was likely my first experience with birding as a spiritual practice, a devotional act of honoring something beyond ourselves, ushered intergenerationally, relationally, from grandparent to grandchild. These were some of many important, if not understated, moments where they modeled reverence, wonder, and love. So much so that I have the privilege of what that looks like, what that feels like, and how that might begin to manifest in community. It wasn't until years later that I would incorporate a bird watching practice into my own adult life. My friend tried. I still wasn't ready to wake up that early. For a while, I didn't think I needed it. And then I found myself leaving a long relationship, leaving legal practice, and I needed to start getting outside. Actually, it was my mother nudging me at that point. But I began to bird alone, thinking, rather naively, that I was the only woman at that point in her mid-30s in Miami who was drawn to this practice. That was until I discovered the Phoebes, a kind and generous group of women affiliated with the Tropical Audubon Society and who started an all-female identifying birding group committed to inclusive intergenerational birding and post-birding potluck brunch, I might add. Operating and leading as a collective, the organizers of the Phoebes took turns taking on different aspects of the bird walks. Each experienced birders with their own strengths. It was about slowing down and spending time observing and learning about the birds we saw. It was about helping one another to make sure that everyone on the walk, at whatever level we came in with, comfort and otherwise, had the opportunity to witness and connect as we wished, with the birds, with one another, with ourselves. When I began birding with the women of the Phoebes, I noticed there was a quiet reverence about these women, an openness that few of us experience in most secular spaces, I would say. If you know of some more secular spaces, please talk to me afterwards. And for me, as a budding student of religious studies, even then, that was it. The Phoebes weren't creating secular space. They were living, at least in my language, into the sacred space that is already around and within us. And for me, being in community together, in reverence of the birds, was a dynamic, relational, spiritual practice. One that we possibly, and can do anywhere there are birds. Anywhere where we are willing to be in reverent relationship with them and with one another. Now this brings me here, back to Cambridge, or to Cambridge. About a year and a half, I got ahead of myself, because I'm feeling so grounded here right now. About a year and a half before my body set foot on Cambridge, or what is now known as Cambridge, the people of color group in First Parish of Cambridge began to teach me a great deal of what it means to listen in UQ community. I was first encouraged to reach out the spring before Divinity School, and Karen, Karita, Tracy, Rashid, Jagmeet, and so many others welcomed me in. It was still early on in the pandemic, a time where I largely lived alone and could no longer bird in person with the Phoebes, and community connection was sparse. Their love, support, and deep presence not only helped me practice the skills and confidence to further connections with folks in my home congregation, but it sustained me through my first year of divinity school. And then the last year in person while I was first getting my bearings in Cambridge. So really, this was 2.5 years now. I still attend when I can, albeit less frequently at this point. I had been here close to 6 months in person last year when we began talking about going on a contemplative bird walk together. I had started birding in community again and even had been coaxed to guide such walks in the divinity school. The people of First Parish of Cambridge, people of color group, listened along with me, gave me grace, and we found our way to a morning in the Mount Auburn Cemetery for spring migration. Walking, sitting, sharing, looking, gently listening to one another, to the birds. This fall, I haven't yet been blessed with the experience of seeing and feeling a murmuration. And sometimes I wonder when or if I next will feel it, as large flocks have largely diminished in number, largely due to human intervention, to put it lightly. These days, much of what I find myself doing, on bird walks, in writing, and otherwise, is reclaiming the wonder and connectedness of my youth. Finding spaces where it feels safe enough to be myself in my own fullness of prayer, of wonder. Spaces that invite us to be open to what it means to truly be open to one another and to ourselves in the listening. I would like to introduce our closing hymn, which is number 21 from Singing the Living Tradition, For the Beauty of the Earth.